When 85-year-old Evelyn Harris faces unexpected humiliation at her neighborhood grocery store, a group of veterans step in, not just to defend her dignity, but to ignite a movement that could heal an entire community. Before we get started, don't forget to like, subscribe, and let us know where you're watching from. Let's dive in. Evelyn Harris woke to the soft glow of dawn filtering through her bedroom curtains, casting a warm light over the cherished photographs that lined her dresser. Each frame held a piece of her history. Her wedding day, her children's first steps, family reunions filled with laughter and love. At 85 years old, Evelyn was a matriarch in her community, known for her wisdom, grace, and the homemade pies she baked for every occasion. She sat up slowly, her joints stiff from the years, but her spirit undiminished. The aroma of jasmine tea, her morning ritual, beckoned from the kitchen. Evelyn slipped into her favorite robe, a deep burgundy quilted with delicate patterns, and made her way downstairs. The house creaked gently, a familiar symphony that comforted her. As she sipped her tea, she gazed out the window at the awakening neighborhood. Children were beginning to stir, their playful voices carrying on the breeze. Birds flitted between trees, and the distant hum of cars signaled the start of a new day. Evelyn smiled softly. Sundays were her favorite. It was the day she hosted her family's weekly dinner, a tradition spanning decades. Her granddaughter Jasmine had called the night before. "Grandma, can I bring anything tomorrow?" she had asked. "Just your lovely self," Evelyn had replied. "But if you insist, maybe some of that herbal tea you mentioned last time." "Consider it done. Love you, Grandma." "Love you too, dear." Evelyn set her cup down and unfolded the shopping list she'd penned the previous evening. It was a carefully curated selection of ingredients for her famous peach cobbler and savory pot roast. The list was more than groceries. It was a promise of togetherness, of stories shared around a crowded dining table. She prepared herself for the day, choosing a powder blue dress that complemented her silver hair. A string of pearls, another gift from her late husband, Thomas, adorned her neck. Evelyn glanced at their wedding photo, touching the edge of the frame gently. "Still watching over me, aren't you?" she whispered. Taking her cane, more for comfort than necessity, she stepped outside. The morning air was crisp, carrying the scent of freshly cut grass and the faint aroma of coffee from a neighbor's open window. She locked her door and began her leisurely walk to the local grocery store, a place she'd frequented for as long as she could remember. As she strolled down the sidewalk, familiar faces greeted her warmly. "Good morning, Mrs. Harris," called out Mr. Whitman, tending to his garden. "Morning, Harold. Your roses are blooming beautifully," she replied. He beamed. "Not as beautiful as your gardenias, I bet." Evelyn chuckled and continued on, passing by the park where young families played. A little girl chasing a butterfly caught her eye, and she paused to watch the innocent joy unfold. Moments like these filled her with hope for the future. The grocery store came into view, a modest establishment with a red brick facade and large windows displaying colorful posters of fresh produce. The bell above the door jingled softly as she entered, the cool air inside offering a brief respite from the growing warmth outside. "Mrs. Harris, lovely to see you," said Susan, the longtime cashier, with a smile as bright as the sun. "Always a pleasure, Susan. How are the twins?" "Growing like weeds. They started school this week." "Time does fly. Give them my love." "Will do." Evelyn picked up a basket and began her usual route through the aisles. She selected the freshest vegetables, inspecting each one with care. In the fruit section, she gently squeezed the peaches, searching for those at the peak of ripeness. The soft fuzz and sweet aroma indicated she'd found the perfect ones. "Making your famous cobbler, I see," noted Mr. Lopez, the produce manager. "You know me too well," she laughed. "Save me a slice?" "Consider it done." Moving on, she reached the spice aisle, reaching for cinnamon and nutmeg. A young boy stood on his tiptoes nearby, struggling to grab a jar from a high shelf. "Need some help, dear?" she asked. He nodded shyly. Evelyn retrieved the jar and handed it to him. "Thank you, ma'am." "You're very welcome." As she continued shopping, she couldn't help but notice a new employee stocking shelves. He was young, perhaps in his early 20s, with a tense expression and hurried movements. His name tag read, Daniel. She offered a friendly nod, but he seemed preoccupied, avoiding eye contact. Evelyn thought little of it and proceeded to the bakery section to pick up a loaf of freshly baked bread. The scent was irresistible, and she decided to get an extra one for her neighbor, Mrs. Thompson, who had mentioned missing the store's special rye bread. With her basket full, Evelyn made her way to the checkout lanes. Most were open, but she chose the one with the shortest line to spare her knees from standing too long. To her surprise, the cashier was Daniel, the new employee she'd noticed earlier. "Good afternoon," she said warmly as she began placing her items on the counter. Daniel glanced up briefly. "Afternoon," he replied curtly, scanning the items with rapid motions. Evelyn tried to engage him in conversation. "It's a lovely day outside, isn't it?" He didn't respond, his focus fixed on the register. The beeping of scanned items filled the silence. Evelyn felt a slight unease but maintained her pleasant demeanor. "That'll be $42.76, he stated flatly. She reached into her purse to retrieve her wallet. Her fingers sifted through the compartments, searching for her checkbook. "Oh dear, I thought I had it right here," she murmured. Behind her, a couple of customers joined the line. Evelyn's hands began to tremble slightly, a subtle sign of her age that sometimes surfaced during moments of mild stress. "Everything okay?" Daniel asked, though his tone lacked genuine concern. "Yes, I just need a moment to find my checkbook," she replied, offering an apologetic smile to the customers behind her. He sighed audibly, tapping his fingers on the counter. "We do accept cards, you know." Evelyn felt a flush of embarrassment. "I prefer to use checks for my records." He rolled his eyes. "Of course." She finally found the checkbook and began to write, her handwriting elegant but slow. The atmosphere grew tense as the line behind her lengthened. She could hear faint whispers and shuffled feet. "Some people aren't in a hurry today," a voice muttered from behind. Evelyn's cheeks warmed. She handed the check to Daniel, who examined it as if suspecting it might bounce. "Do you have ID?" he asked. "Yes, right here." She presented her driver's license. He scrutinized it before completing the transaction. "Have a nice day," he said, already turning his attention to the next customer. "Thank you," she replied softly, though she doubted he heard her. Gathering her bags, she felt a heaviness that hadn't been there before. The interaction left her pondering. Was she moving too slowly? Had she inconvenienced others? She prided herself on being considerate, and the thought that she might have caused frustration troubled her. As she made her way toward the exit, she heard a stifled laugh, followed by a whispered comment. "Old folks should shop when it's not busy," someone said. Evelyn's steps faltered. The words stung, but she took a deep breath and continued walking, her posture as dignified as ever. She pushed open the door, the bell jingling behind her, a stark contrast to the sinking feeling in her heart. Outside, the sun shone brightly, but the warmth didn't reach her. She paused on a bench near the entrance to collect herself. Closing her eyes, she inhaled deeply, focusing on the familiar sense of blooming flowers and freshly cut grass. She reminded herself that she had just as much right to be there as anyone else. "Mrs. Harris, are you all right?" a voice asked gently. She opened her eyes to see Mr. Patel, the kind owner of the bookstore next door. "Yes, thank you. Just resting for a moment." He sat beside her. "It's always good to take a break. Can I help you with your bags?" "That's very kind of you, but I can manage." He nodded, respecting her independence. "If you need anything, don't hesitate to ask." "You're very kind," she said, offering a genuine smile. Feeling somewhat restored, Evelyn rose from the bench. "I should get home. Lots to prepare for tonight." "Ah, the famous Sunday dinner. Your family is lucky to have you." "I'm the lucky one," she replied. As she walked home, she tried to shake off the earlier incident. The world was changing, and she knew that patience was often in short supply. Yet, she believed that kindness and respect were timeless virtues, ones she hoped were not being forgotten. Unbeknownst to her, a group of local veterans had witnessed the exchange inside the store. James, a tall man with a commanding presence, had watched the interaction from a nearby aisle. His friends, Robert and Michael, both noticed the subtle ways in which Evelyn had been disrespected. "Did you see how that cashier treated Mrs. Harris?" Robert asked, his voice tinged with irritation. "Yes," James replied, his eyes narrowing. "It's unacceptable." "She's the sweetest lady around," Michael added. "We should say something." "Agreed," James said firmly, "but let's make sure we handle it appropriately." As Evelyn disappeared down the street, the veterans exchanged a determined look. They felt a collective responsibility to address what they'd seen, a resolve that would set in motion events none of them could yet foresee. Back at home, Evelyn unpacked her groceries, placing each item meticulously in its designated spot. The familiar routine soothed her, and soon the kitchen was filled with the comforting sounds of chopping vegetables and the sizzle of meat in a hot pan. She hummed a favorite tune, allowing the melody to lift her spirits. The earlier incident at the store began to fade as she immersed herself in the joy of cooking. This was her domain, a place where love was the main ingredient in every dish. As the afternoon sun cast golden hues across her kitchen, Evelyn set the table with her finest china. Each plate and glass was a testament to family gatherings past, a tapestry of memories woven through shared meals and heartfelt conversations. She glanced at the clock. In a few hours, her home would be filled with the laughter and warmth of those she loved most. The thought brought a smile to her face, erasing the remnants of the day's unpleasantness. Little did she know, the events set in motion at the grocery store were about to unfold in ways that would reaffirm her faith in community and the enduring power of standing up for what's right. Evelyn Harris stood outside the grocery store for a moment longer, gathering her thoughts before deciding to head back inside. She realized she had forgotten to buy vanilla extract for her peach cobbler, a small but essential ingredient that added warmth and depth to the dessert. Determined not to let her earlier interaction dampen her spirits, she took a deep breath and re-entered the store, the bell above the door chiming softly. Inside, the atmosphere had shifted slightly. The lunchtime rush was beginning, and more customers filled the aisles. Evelyn navigated her way to the baking section, her cane tapping lightly against the polished floor. She found the vanilla extract on the top shelf, just out of her reach. Standing on her toes, she stretched her arm upward, but couldn't grasp it. "Excuse me," she called gently to a passing employee. It was Daniel, the same young man who had checked her out earlier. "Could you please help me reach that bottle on the top shelf?" He glanced at her, his expression indifferent. "Can't you see I'm busy?" he replied curtly, rearranging items on a lower shelf without making eye contact. Evelyn was taken aback. "I apologize, but it would only take a moment." He sighed loudly, stood up, and grabbed the bottle with a swift motion. "Here," he said, handing it to her without a smile. "Thank you," she said, her voice steady but tinged with disappointment. As she turned to leave, she heard him mutter under his breath, "People should know their limits." She paused, unsure if she had heard correctly. Deciding to give him the benefit of the doubt, she continued toward the front of the store. However, the weight of his words settled uncomfortably in her chest. She approached Susan's register this time, hoping for a kinder interaction. "Back again, Mrs. Harris?" Susan asked cheerfully. "Just forgot one little thing," Evelyn replied, placing the vanilla extract on the counter. As Susan scanned the item, Evelyn reached into her purse to retrieve some cash. Her fingers brushed against an old photograph tucked inside, a picture of her and Thomas on their anniversary. The memory brought a soft smile to her face, momentarily lifting her spirits. "That'll be $3.49, Susan said. Evelyn handed her a $5 bill. "Keep the change, dear." "Oh, that's not necessary," Susan replied. "I insist," Evelyn said with a wink. "Buy yourself a treat." "Thank you so much." Evelyn placed the small bottle into her bag and made her way toward the exit. As she passed by the customer service desk, she noticed Daniel speaking with another employee. Their conversation was hushed, but their glances in her direction were unmistakable. Feeling increasingly unsettled, she decided to address the issue. Evelyn approached them calmly. "Excuse me, is everything all right?" Daniel looked startled. "Everything's fine," he said tersely. The other employee, a young woman named Lily, shifted uncomfortably. "Yes, everything's okay," she echoed. Evelyn considered letting the matter drop but felt compelled to speak. "I couldn't help but notice some tension. If there's a problem, I'd like to understand." Daniel crossed his arms. "Look, we're just trying to do our jobs here. Maybe you should mind your own business." Lily's eyes widened. "Daniel," she whispered urgently. Evelyn remained composed. "Young man, I understand that everyone has difficult days, but there's no need for rudeness." He scoffed. "You people always think you deserve special treatment." A hush seemed to fall over the immediate area. Evelyn felt a mix of emotions, surprise, hurt, and a rising sense of indignation. She chose her words carefully. I'm not asking for special treatment, just basic courtesy. Before Daniel could respond, the store manager, Mr. Thompson, approached. Is there a problem here? He asked, looking between them. Evelyn turned to him. I was just trying to clarify an issue, but perhaps now isn't the best time. Mr. Thompson glanced at Daniel, noting his defensive posture. Daniel, why don't you take a short break? He suggested. Daniel shook his head. Fine by me, he said, walking away without another word. I'm sorry for any inconvenience, Mr. Thompson began. Harris? Evelyn Harris. Mrs. Harris, I apologize if any of my staff were discourteous. Please let me know if there's anything I can do. Thank you, but I don't wish to cause any trouble. I hope everyone has a better day moving forward. With that, she offered a polite nod and exited the store. Outside, the sun had climbed higher, casting a bright light that contrasted sharply with the shadows she felt inside. She began her walk home, each step heavier than the last. As she passed the park again, the sounds of children playing seemed distant. Her thoughts were clouded with the events at the store. Evelyn had lived through times of overt discrimination and had hoped such days were behind her. The subtlety of Daniel's remarks was a painful reminder that prejudice could still find its way into everyday interactions. Lost in her thoughts, she didn't notice the uneven section of the sidewalk ahead. Her foot caught on a raised edge, and she stumbled, dropping her bag. The vanilla extract rolled out, the glass bottle shattering upon impact. Are you all right? A voice called out. Evelyn looked up to see a young woman jogging toward her. Yes, I'm fine, she replied, though her palms were scraped and her knees felt bruised. Here, let me help you, the woman said, gently assisting Evelyn to a nearby bench. Thank you, dear. I'm just a bit clumsy today. Nonsense. That sidewalk is a hazard, the woman replied. My name's Karen. Evelyn Harris, pleasure to meet you, despite the circumstances. Karen smiled warmly. Wait here, I'll gather your things. As Karen collected the scattered items, Evelyn noticed a group of men approaching from the opposite direction. They were the local veterans, James, Robert, and Michael, returning from their preparations at the community center. Evelyn, is that you? James called out. She looked up, recognizing their familiar faces. Yes, it's me, just had a little tumble. The men hurried over. What happened? Robert asked with concern. Just tripped over the sidewalk, she explained. Michael inspected the uneven concrete. They really need to fix this. It's a hazard. Karen returned with Evelyn's bag, her expression sympathetic. I think the vanilla didn't make it, she said apologetically. Evelyn sighed softly. It's all right. I can do without it this time. James exchanged a glance with his friends. Nonsense. We'll get you another one. Oh, I don't want to trouble you, she protested. It's no trouble at all, Robert insisted. We're heading back that way anyway. Karen looked at her watch. I have to get going, but are you sure you're okay? Yes, thanks to you, Evelyn replied gratefully. It was nice meeting you, Karen said before continuing her jog. After she left, the veterans helped Evelyn to her feet. Let's walk you home, Michael suggested. I appreciate it, she said, accepting James's arm for support. As they walked, James noticed the slight tremor in her hands. Are you sure you're feeling all right? Just a bit shaken, to be honest, she admitted. Did something else happen? Robert asked gently. Evelyn considered whether to share her earlier experiences at the store. Seeing the genuine concern in their faces, she decided to confide in them. I had an unpleasant encounter at the grocery store. A new employee was rather rude. James frowned. What did he say? She recounted the interactions with Daniel, careful to relay the facts without embellishment. The veterans listened attentively, their expressions growing more serious. That's unacceptable, Michael said firmly. No one should be treated that way. I don't want to make a fuss, Evelyn said. Maybe he's just having a bad day. Regardless, there's no excuse for disrespect, James replied, especially towards someone as esteemed as you. They reached her front porch, the familiar sight of her well-tended garden bringing a sense of comfort. Would you like to come in for some tea? She offered. Another time, perhaps, Robert said kindly. We need to head back, but we'll check on you later. Thank you, gentlemen. Your kindness means a great deal to me. After ensuring she was safely inside, the veterans departed, their mood markedly different from earlier. "We can't let this slide," James said as soon as they were out of earshot. "I agree," Michael responded. "But how should we handle it?" "Directly," Robert suggested. "We'll speak to the store manager and make sure he understands the gravity of the situation." "Let's also see if others have had similar experiences," James added. "This might be part of a larger issue." Meanwhile, Evelyn settled into her favorite armchair, a cup of jasmine tea warming her hands. She gazed out the window at the vibrant blooms in her garden. The colors seemed less bright today, the petals slightly wilted, a reflection of her own wariness. She thought about calling her granddaughter but decided against it. Jasmine was busy with work and didn't need to be burdened with her worries. Instead, Evelyn closed her eyes and allowed herself a moment of rest. Back at the grocery store, the veterans entered with a purposeful stride. They approached the customer service desk, where Mr. Thompson was assisting another customer. "Excuse me," James said politely once the customer had left. "We'd like to speak with you about an important matter." Mr. Thompson recognized them as regular patrons. "Of course. How can I help you?" James introduced himself and his friends. "We witnessed an incident earlier involving one of your employees and a valued member of our community, Mrs. Evelyn Harris." Mr. Thompson's expression grew concerned. "Yes, I recall a brief interaction. Is there a problem?" "There is," Robert stated. "Your employee Daniel was disrespectful and dismissive toward Mrs. Harris on more than one occasion." Michael nodded. "We believe this reflects poorly on your establishment and affects the community's trust in your business." Thompson sighed. "I was aware of some tension but didn't realize it was that serious. Daniel is new and still learning." "That may be," James replied, "but his behavior is unacceptable. We suggest immediate action to address this issue." "I understand," Mr. Thompson said thoughtfully. "I appreciate you bringing this to my attention. I'll have a conversation with him and ensure proper training is provided." "Thank you," Robert said. "We hope to see positive changes." As they left the store, the veterans felt a sense of accomplishment, but knew their work wasn't done. "We should follow up with Mrs. Harris," Michael suggested. "Agreed," James said, "and perhaps we can involve the community to prevent such incidents in the future." Later that afternoon, Evelyn busied herself in the kitchen, determined to focus on the upcoming family dinner. The rich aroma of the pot roast filled the house, mingling with the sweet scent of baking peaches. She set the table with care, each place setting a tribute to her loved ones. A knock at the door startled her. Wiping her hands on her apron, she went to answer it. To her surprise, James, Robert, and Michael stood on her porch, holding a small bag. "Good evening, Mrs. Harris," James greeted. "Good evening. What brings you by?" "We wanted to check on you and brought a replacement for your vanilla extract," Michael said, handing her the bag. "That is so thoughtful," she exclaimed. "Please, come in." They entered the cozy living room, taking in the welcoming atmosphere. "Your home always feels so warm," Robert commented. "Thank you. Can I offer you some tea?" "Actually, we wanted to discuss something important," James said gently. Evelyn gestured for them to sit. "Of course. What's on your minds?" James explained their visit to the grocery store and their conversation with Mr. Thompson. "We felt it was necessary to address the situation directly," he concluded. She listened carefully, touched by their concern. "You went to all that trouble for me?" "It was no trouble," Michael assured her. "We believe in standing up for one another." Evelyn felt a surge of gratitude. "I don't know how to thank you." "Your well-being is thanks enough," Robert replied. They chatted for a while longer, discussing community events and shared interests. The camaraderie eased the weight that had settled on Evelyn's heart. As they prepared to leave, James hesitated. "If you ever need anything, please don't hesitate to call us." "I will," she promised. "And you're all welcome to join us for dinner tonight." They exchanged glances. "We wouldn't want to impose," Michael said. "You're not imposing. In fact, I'd be honored if you'd stay." With that, the decision was made. The table was expanded to include the three men, and soon the house was filled with the sounds of lively conversation and laughter. As they gathered around the table, Evelyn looked at each face, her family and new friends alike. The earlier events of the day seemed distant now, overshadowed by the warmth of community and the reaffirmation of shared values. The evening unfolded beautifully. each moment a testament to the strength found in unity and mutual respect. And while challenges remained, Evelyn felt hopeful that together they could foster a kinder, more understanding community for all. Evelyn Harris's home was abuzz with the sounds of family. The clinking of dishes, the murmur of conversations, and the occasional burst of laughter filled the air. The aroma of her freshly baked peach cobbler mingled with the savory scent of the pot roast, creating an inviting atmosphere that wrapped around everyone like a warm embrace. Seated around the extended dining table were her children, grandchildren, and the three veterans, James, Robert, and Michael, who had become unexpected guests. The initial introductions had given way to lively discussions, stories of the past, and shared experiences that bridged generational gaps. "Grandma, this cobbler is amazing as always," her grandson Marcus exclaimed, helping himself to a second serving. "Save some for the rest of us," Jasmine teased, nudging her brother playfully. Evelyn watched her family with contentment, her earlier troubles fading into the background. She was grateful for the support and friendship of the veterans, whose presence added a new layer of richness to the gathering. As the evening progressed, James leaned over to Evelyn. "Thank you for inviting us. This feels like home." "You're most welcome. It's a pleasure to have you all here," she replied warmly. Robert raised his glass. "To community and new friendships," he toasted. "Cheers," echoed around the table. Later, as the dishes were cleared and the family began to disperse, the veterans offered to help with the cleanup. "Nonsense," Evelyn insisted. "You're guests. Please relax." "We insist," Michael countered. "It's the least we can do." Together, they tidied the kitchen, the task made lighter by easy conversation. Once everything was in order, they settled into the cozy living room. A soft glow from the table lamp cast a gentle light over the room, highlighting the framed photographs and keepsakes that told the story of Evelyn's life. "Mrs. Harris, if you don't mind, we'd like to discuss something important," James began, his tone respectful yet earnest. "Of course," she said, sensing the gravity of his words. "We've been thinking about what happened at the store today," Robert continued. "It's not just about one incident. It's about ensuring that everyone in our community is treated with the respect they deserve." Evelyn nodded slowly. "I understand, but what can be done?" Michael leaned forward. "We believe that raising awareness is the first step. Perhaps organizing a community meeting to discuss issues of respect and inclusivity." She considered their suggestion. "That could be beneficial. Open dialogue can lead to understanding." "Exactly," James agreed. "We also thought it might be helpful to involve the store management in these discussions." Evelyn hesitated. "I don't want to single out anyone or cause trouble." Robert smiled reassuringly. "Our goal isn't to cause trouble, but to foster a stronger, more united community." She looked at each of them, seeing the sincerity in their eyes. "All right, if you think it will help, I'm willing to support your efforts." "Thank you," Michael said. "Your involvement means a lot." The following day, the veterans set their plan into motion. They visited the community center, a hub for local events and gatherings, and spoke with the director, Mrs. Green. "An open forum on community respect and unity?" she repeated thoughtfully. "I think that's a wonderful idea." "We were hoping to schedule it for next week if possible," James said. "Let me check the calendar," Mrs. Green replied, flipping through her planner. "It looks like we have an opening on Thursday evening." "Perfect," Robert said. "We'll handle the promotion and outreach." "I'll assist in any way I can," Mrs. Green offered. "This is an important initiative." With the date set, the veterans began spreading the word. They created flyers, reached out to local organizations, and utilized social media platforms to invite community members. Their message was clear: building a stronger community through mutual respect and understanding. Meanwhile, at the grocery store, Daniel was called into Mr. Thompson's office. "Have a seat," the manager said, his expression neutral. Daniel sat down, fidgeting slightly. "Is there a problem?" "I've received some concerning feedback regarding your interactions with customers," Mr. Thompson began. Daniel shifted uncomfortably. "I don't know what you mean." "Specifically, your behavior toward Mrs. Evelyn Harris. It's been reported that you were disrespectful and dismissive." He looked away. "I didn't mean anything by it." "Intentional or not, your actions reflect on this establishment," Mr. Thompson said firmly. We pride ourselves on excellent customer service and treating everyone with courtesy. Daniel sighed. It's just been a tough week. I understand that personal challenges can affect us, but it's important to maintain professionalism, the manager replied. I'd like to offer you additional training to help improve your customer interactions. Do I have a choice? Daniel asked somewhat defiantly. Consider it an opportunity for growth, Mr. Thompson said. I believe you have potential, but it's up to you to make the most of it. Daniel nodded reluctantly. All right. That evening, Daniel returned home to his small apartment. He tossed his keys on the table and collapsed onto the couch. The weight of the day's events pressed heavily upon him. His phone buzzed with a message from his sister. Hey, just checking in. How are you holding up? He stared at the screen, debating whether to respond. Finally, he typed back, Been better. Work stuff. Want to talk about it? She replied. Not really. She sent a final message. I'm here if you need me. Daniel tossed the phone aside, frustration bubbling within him. He felt misunderstood, cornered by circumstances he felt were beyond his control. Yet, a small voice inside questioned his actions. Was he being fair to others, or was he projecting his own frustrations onto them? Across town, Evelyn prepared for bed. She brushed her silver hair and reflected on the day's developments. The idea of the community meeting both intrigued and unsettled her. While she believed in the importance of open dialogue, she worried about the potential for conflict. She sat at her writing desk and began penning a letter. Dear Mr. Thompson, I wanted to express my appreciation for your attention to the matter we discussed. It is my hope that we can all work together to create a more welcoming environment for everyone. Sincerely, Evelyn Harris. She sealed the envelope, deciding to deliver it personally the next day. Perhaps a gesture of goodwill could help mend any lingering tensions. The week passed quickly as preparations for the community meeting continued. The veterans were pleased with the positive responses they received. Many residents expressed interest, eager to participate in conversations that could lead to meaningful change. On Thursday evening, the community center buzzed with activity. Chairs were arranged in a large circle to encourage open discussion. A diverse group of attendees filled the room, young and old, business owners, teachers, parents, and students. Evelyn arrived early, greeted warmly by Mrs. Green. I'm so glad you could make it, she said. I'm happy to be here, Evelyn replied. It's wonderful to see so many people coming together. James approached them. Mrs. Harris, would you be willing to share a few words during the meeting? She hesitated. I'm not much of a public speaker. Your perspective would be invaluable, he encouraged. Just speak from the heart. I'll consider it, she said softly. As the meeting commenced, James stood to address the crowd. Thank you all for joining us tonight. Our goal is to foster a stronger community through open dialogue and mutual respect. Applause rippled through the room. We've all experienced moments when we felt unheard or misunderstood, he continued. Tonight, let's share our stories and listen to one another. Various attendees stood to speak, sharing personal experiences and offering suggestions for improvement. The atmosphere was one of empathy and collaboration. After a while, James glanced at Evelyn, silently inviting her to contribute. Summoning her courage, she rose from her seat. Good evening, she began, her voice steady but gentle. My name is Evelyn Harris. I've lived in this community for many years and have witnessed both its challenges and its strengths. All eyes turned toward her, attentive and respectful. Recently, I had an experience that reminded me of the importance of kindness and understanding, she continued. It made me reflect on how our actions, even small ones, can impact others in significant ways. She shared her story, focusing not on blame, but on the broader theme of compassion. We all carry burdens that others may not see. A little patience and courtesy can go a long way in making someone's day a bit brighter. The room was silent for a moment before warm applause filled the space. Thank you for sharing, Mrs. Harris, James said appreciatively. As the meeting progressed, actionable ideas were proposed. Organizing community events, implementing customer service workshops for local businesses, and creating support networks for those in need. Unbeknownst to many, Daniel had entered the back of the room, drawn by curiosity. He listened intently, his gaze fixed on Evelyn as she spoke. Her words resonated with him, stirring a mix of emotions, guilt, reflection, and a desire to make amends. After the meeting concluded, attendees mingled, exchanging thoughts and contact information. Daniel hesitated before approaching Evelyn, who was engaged in conversation with Mrs. Green. "Excuse me, Mrs. Harris," he said quietly. She turned to face him, her expression neutral. "Yes?" "I'm Daniel, from the grocery store," he introduced himself, his eyes downcast. "I wanted to apologize for how I treated you." She regarded him thoughtfully. "I appreciate you coming here to tell me that." He looked up, meeting her gaze. "I've been going through some personal issues, but that's no excuse for my behavior. I'm sorry for any hurt I caused." Evelyn's features softened. "Thank you for your apology. It takes courage to admit when we're wrong." "I hope you can forgive me," he said earnestly. "Consider it forgiven," she replied with a gentle smile. "I hope things improve for you." He nodded, relief evident on his face. "Thank you." As Daniel walked away, Evelyn felt a sense of closure. She believed in second chances and was hopeful that this experience would lead to positive change for him. The veterans approached her, having witnessed the exchange. "That was gracious of you," Robert remarked. "Everyone deserves an opportunity to grow," she replied. James nodded. "Agreed. Tonight was a success in many ways." Over the next few weeks, the community felt a palpable shift. The grocery store implemented new customer service training, emphasizing empathy and respect. Daniel embraced the opportunity to improve, often going out of his way to assist customers with a newfound sincerity. Evelyn continued her routine, frequenting the store without apprehension. On one occasion, Daniel greeted her with a genuine smile. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Harris. Can I help you find anything today?" "Hello, Daniel. I'm just picking up a few things, but thank you," she replied warmly. "Let me know if you need any assistance," he offered. As she proceeded with her shopping, she felt a renewed sense of community spirit. Small gestures of kindness seemed more prevalent. Neighbors greeting one another, doors held open, simple acts that collectively made a significant impact. The veterans remained active, organizing monthly meetings and community events. Their efforts brought people together, fostering connections that transcended differences. One sunny afternoon, Evelyn hosted a garden party, inviting friends, family, and neighbors. The vibrant flowers provided a picturesque backdrop as guests mingled, enjoying homemade treats and lively conversation. James approached her, holding a glass of lemonade. "Your garden is beautiful," he complimented. "Thank you. It's been a labor of love," she replied. "You've created something special here," he said, gesturing to the gathering. "It's a testament to what community can achieve when we come together." She smiled. "I believe that wholeheartedly." As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the garden, Evelyn looked around at the faces of those she cherished. Laughter rang out as children played, and the hum of contented conversation filled the air. In that moment, she felt a profound sense of peace. The challenges she had faced served not as sources of bitterness but as catalysts for growth and unity. The community had rallied together, transforming adversity into an opportunity for collective betterment. Evelyn raised her glass, prompting the attention of her guests. "I'd like to propose a toast," she announced, "to friendship, understanding, and the strength we find in one another." "Cheers!" voices echoed in unison. The clinking of glasses signified more than just a celebration. It was a symbol of the bonds forged through shared experiences and the commitment to fostering a community where everyone felt valued. As twilight enveloped the garden, Evelyn knew that while no community was perfect, the willingness to listen, learn, and support one another made all the difference. And in that knowledge, she found joy, hope, and a renewed appreciation for the simple beauty of human connection. The morning sun cast long shadows across the pavement as James, Robert, and Michael made their way to the community center. The trio of veterans had become increasingly active in local initiatives, channeling their dedication to service into uplifting their neighborhood. Today, they were finalizing plans for a charity event aimed at supporting underprivileged youth, a cause close to their hearts. As they walked, the conversation flowed easily. "Did you see the plans for the new youth center?" Robert asked, his eyes reflecting enthusiasm. "I did," James replied. "It's about time we had more resources for the kids around here." Michael nodded in agreement. "It's a step in the right direction, Gives them a place to go after school instead of wandering the streets. They arrived at the community center and spent the next few hours coordinating with volunteers, arranging schedules, and ensuring that all the necessary permits were in place. By midday, they decided to take a break and grab some supplies for the upcoming event. "Let's head over to the grocery store," James suggested. "We can pick up some snacks for the volunteers." "Good idea," Robert agreed. "Plus, I need to restock my coffee supply." The three men made their way to the store, engaging in light-hearted banter. The atmosphere inside was bustling, with shoppers weaving through aisles and clerks restocking shelves. As they moved toward the snack section, the sound of a familiar voice caught their attention. "Young man, I believe there's a mistake here," came the gentle but firm tone of Evelyn Harris. Curious, the veterans glanced toward the checkout area. Evelyn stood at the register, her posture dignified yet tense. Across from her was Daniel, the cashier, his expression a mix of impatience and disdain. "Ma'am, as I said, the coupon is expired," Daniel stated flatly. Evelyn examined the coupon. "I was told it was valid through the end of the month," he shrugged. "Well, it's not. You'll have to pay full price or leave it." She took a deep breath. "May I speak with a manager, please?" Daniel rolled his eyes. "They're busy right now." Observing the exchange, James felt a familiar knot of frustration tighten in his chest. "That's Mrs. Harris," he whispered to his friends. "I don't like the way he's talking to her," Robert remarked, his brow furrowing. "Neither do I," Michael added. "Let's step in." The three men approached the checkout area calmly but purposefully. As they drew nearer, they could hear the murmurs of other customers who had begun to notice the tension. "Is there a problem here?" James inquired politely, directing his question to both Evelyn and Daniel. Evelyn turned to see the veterans beside her. Relief flickered across her face. "Oh, hello, gentlemen. It's just a small misunderstanding." Daniel crossed his arms. "It's store policy. I can't accept expired coupons." Robert glanced at the coupon in question. "May I see it?" he asked Evelyn. "Of course," she replied, handing it to him. He examined the fine print. "It says valid through the end of this month. Today's the 28th. Daniel huffed. "Let me see that," he demanded, snatching the coupon from Robert's hand. He scanned it briefly before muttering, "Fine." Evelyn offered a gracious smile. "Thank you for checking." He began scanning her items with exaggerated motions, the scanner beeping loudly in the now quiet store. The atmosphere was thick with unspoken tension, and several customers had paused to watch the unfolding scene. Michael decided to address the elephant in the room. "Excuse me," he said to Daniel, his tone measured but firm. "We couldn't help but notice that you've been less than courteous." Daniel glared at him. "Look, I don't need a lecture. I'm just doing my job." "Part of your job is providing good customer service," James interjected. "There's no need for disrespect." Daniel's eyes flashed with irritation. "You people always think you can tell me how to do my job." A collective gasp rippled through the onlookers. Evelyn's eyes widened, and a flush crept up her cheeks, not from embarrassment but from the sting of the insinuation. "Excuse me?" Robert said, his voice low but edged with disbelief. Before the situation could escalate further, Mr. Thompson appeared, alerted by the noticeable disturbance. "Is everything all right here?" he asked, looking between Daniel, Evelyn, and the veterans. Evelyn took a step back. "Perhaps we should all take a moment to calm down." James addressed the manager directly. "We were concerned about the way Mrs. Harris was being treated." Mr. Thompson looked at Daniel. "Daniel, is there a problem?" Daniel threw up his hands. "I'm just trying to enforce store policy. They're the ones causing a scene." "That's not accurate," Michael countered. "We simply pointed out that the coupon is valid and expressed concern over his demeanor." The manager sighed, sensing the gravity of the situation. "Daniel, please step into my office. We'll discuss this privately." Daniel scoffed. "Fine," he muttered, stalking away. Turning to Evelyn and the veterans, Mr. Thompson said, "I apologize for any inconvenience. Please allow me to assist you personally." "Thank you," Evelyn replied softly. As Mr. Thompson completed the transaction, he offered additional discounts for the trouble. "We value your patronage, Mrs. Harris," he assured her. "I appreciate your assistance," she said graciously. The crowd began to disperse, and the usual store activity resumed. Outside, the veterans walked with Evelyn to a nearby bench. "Are you all right?" Robert asked, concern evident in his eyes. She nodded slowly. Yes, just a bit unsettled. I'm sorry you had to experience that, Michael said sincerely. Evelyn looked at each of them, her gaze steady. I want to thank you for standing up for me. It means more than you know. James shook his head. It's the least we could do. No one should be treated that way. She sighed softly. I've seen a lot in my years. Sometimes I wonder how much has really changed. Progress can be slow, Robert acknowledged. But moments like these remind us why it's important to keep pushing for better. Michael leaned forward. Would you mind if we shared this experience at our next community meeting? It could help raise awareness. She considered his request. If you believe it will make a difference, then yes. Absolutely, James affirmed. Your voice carries weight. Just then Jasmine approached, her expression a mix of surprise and concern. Grandma, I was just coming to see you. Is everything okay? Evelyn smiled reassuringly. I'm fine, dear. Just had a bit of an adventure at the store. Jasmine glanced at the veterans. Hello, I'm Jasmine, Evelyn's granddaughter. They introduced themselves and James briefly recounted the incident, careful not to alarm her. Thank you for looking out for her, Jasmine said gratefully. It's our pleasure, Robert replied. Evelyn stood, smoothing her skirt. Well, I think it's time I head home. May we accompany you? Michael offered. That would be lovely, she agreed. As they walked, Jasmine linked arms with her grandmother. I'm sorry you had to go through that. Evelyn patted her hand. It's all right. The important thing is that we're taking steps to address it. Back at her house, Evelyn invited them all inside. I was just about to make some tea. Would you care to join me? That sounds wonderful, James accepted. They settled into the cozy living room, the atmosphere lightening as they sipped on warm tea and shared stories. Jasmine was impressed by the veterans' commitment to the community. You all do so much, she remarked. It's inspiring. We believe in giving back, Robert said modestly. Our service didn't end when we left the military. Evelyn nodded in agreement. Their dedication reminds me that there are always good people willing to make a difference. As the afternoon waned, the conversation turned toward actionable steps. I've been thinking, Evelyn began thoughtfully. Perhaps we could organize a workshop or seminar focused on customer service and cultural sensitivity. That's an excellent idea, Michael agreed. We could partner with local businesses. Jasmine's eyes lit up. I could help with that. My company offers training programs, and I might be able to facilitate something. That would be fantastic, James said. The more resources we have, the better. They spent the next hour brainstorming, their collective enthusiasm growing. Plans were made to reach out to other community leaders, businesses, and organizations. Evelyn felt a renewed sense of purpose. It's amazing what can happen when people come together. Indeed, Robert concurred. This could be the start of something impactful. Later, after the veterans had departed, Jasmine lingered with her grandmother. I'm so proud of you, she said softly. You're always looking for ways to help others, Evelyn smiled. It's important to do what we can. Life is too short to stay silent when we can make a positive change. Jasmine hugged her tightly. I hope to be just like you someday. You already are, my dear. Meanwhile, Daniel sat alone in the break room at the grocery store, awaiting a meeting with Mr. Thompson. He replayed the earlier confrontation in his mind, a mix of frustration and regret swirling within him. The door opened, and Mr. Thompson entered, closing it gently behind him. Daniel, we need to talk. He nodded silently. I've received multiple complaints about your behavior toward customers, the manager stated plainly. This is becoming a serious issue. Daniel stared at the table. I didn't mean for things to get out of hand. Intent matters, but so do actions, Mr. Thompson replied. We all have bad days, but we can't let that affect how we treat others. I know, Daniel admitted quietly. I've been dealing with some personal problems. I understand that life can be challenging, the manager acknowledged, but perhaps it's time to seek support. Daniel looked up, vulnerability evident in his eyes. I'm not sure where to start. Mr. Thompson offered a compassionate smile. The company provides access to counseling services. I can help you get connected. Thank you, he said sincerely. In the meantime, I think it would be beneficial for you to participate in the upcoming customer service workshop that's being organized. Workshop? Daniel questioned. Yes. a community initiative focusing on improving interactions and understanding diversity. It's an opportunity for growth. He considered the proposal. All right, I think that could help. Good, Mr. Thompson affirmed. I believe in giving people chances to improve. Let's work together to make this a positive turning point. As Daniel left the office, he felt a glimmer of hope. Perhaps this was the chance he needed to turn things around. Over the next few weeks, preparations for the workshop intensified. Evelyn, the veterans, Jasmine, and other community members collaborated to create a comprehensive program. Flyers were distributed, invitations sent, and local businesses encouraged their employees to attend. The day of the workshop arrived, hosted at the community center. The turnout exceeded expectations, with participants from various sectors: retail workers, service providers, and even law enforcement officers. Evelyn opened the session with a heartfelt speech. Welcome, everyone. Today is about building bridges between individuals, cultures, and experiences. By understanding one another, we can create a more harmonious community. Applause filled the room, and the workshop commenced with interactive activities, group discussions, and role-playing scenarios designed to foster empathy and effective communication. Daniel participated earnestly, engaging in dialogues that challenged his perspectives. During a breakout session, he found himself in a group with Michael. "Thanks for being here," Michael said to him. Daniel met his gaze. "I have to admit, I was hesitant at first, but I'm glad I came." They delved into a conversation about personal struggles and the impact of unconscious biases. Daniel shared some of his challenges, and Michael offered insights from his own experiences. By the end of the day, many attendees expressed that the workshop had been enlightening and transformative. Evelyn mingled with participants, receiving appreciative remarks. When she encountered Daniel, he approached her with a newfound humility. "Mrs. Harris, I wanted to thank you," he said earnestly. She smiled warmly. "For what, dear?" "For this workshop, for your kindness, and for giving me a chance to change." "I'm glad you found it helpful," she replied. "Growth is a continuous journey." He nodded thoughtfully. "I realize now that I wasn't just taking out my frustrations on others, I was preventing myself from connecting with people." "It's never too late to start anew," she encouraged. As the event concluded, there was a palpable sense of unity among the attendees. Plans were made to hold regular sessions, expanding the reach and impact of the initiative. In the weeks that followed, noticeable improvements rippled through the community. Acts of kindness became more frequent, and a spirit of cooperation took root. Evelyn continued her involvement, inspired by the positive changes. One afternoon, she received a letter in the mail. Opening it, she found a handwritten note from Daniel. "Dear Mrs. Harris, I wanted to express my deepest gratitude for your compassion and the opportunities you've provided. Your example has inspired me to become a better person. Sincerely, Daniel." She folded the letter thoughtfully, a gentle smile gracing her features. It was a reminder that even small actions could have profound effects. That evening, she sat on her porch, watching the sunset paint the sky with hues of pink and gold. Jasmine joined her, carrying 2 cups of tea. "Tea time?" her granddaughter offered. "Perfect timing," Evelyn replied. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, savoring the tranquil ambiance. "Grandma," Jasmine began softly, "you've touched so many lives." Evelyn took a sip of her tea. "I've simply tried to do what's right." "It's more than that," Jasmine insisted. "You've shown me and others the power of empathy and the importance of standing up for ourselves and others." Evelyn looked at her lovingly. "I'm proud of you, Jasmine. You're carrying the torch forward." She rested her head on her grandmother's shoulder. "I learned from the best." As night settled in, stars began to twinkle above. Evelyn felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The challenges she had faced were not in vain. They had been catalysts for meaningful change. She reflected on the interconnectedness of their community, the way each person's actions could influence another's life. Standing up wasn't just about confronting wrongdoing. It was about uplifting one another, fostering understanding, and building a foundation of mutual respect. In her heart, she knew that while the journey was ongoing, they were moving in the right direction. And that was more than enough to fill her with hope for the future. The dawn of a new day brought with it a sense of anticipation. Evelyn Harris stood by her kitchen window, watching as the first light painted the sky with shades of pink and gold. The garden below was in full bloom, each flower a testament to resilience and growth, a reflection of the community she cherished. Today was special. The community had organized a unity festival, a celebration of togetherness and the strides made toward fostering understanding and respect among neighbors. The event was the culmination of weeks of collaboration inspired by the recent workshops and dialogues that had taken root in the town. Evelyn busied herself preparing her famous peach cobbler, determined to contribute to the festivities. The aroma filled her home, mingling with the fresh morning air wafting through the open windows. As she placed the cobbler into a basket, her phone rang. "Good morning, Grandma," Jasmine's cheerful voice greeted her. "Good morning, dear. Are you on your way?" Evelyn asked. "Yes, I'll be there in about 10 minutes. Need any help carrying things?" "That would be wonderful. I've got a few dishes to bring. See you soon." True to her word, Jasmine arrived shortly after, her smile as bright as the sun. Together, they loaded the car with Evelyn's contributions and headed to the town square, where the festival was already coming to life. Banners and balloons adorned the area, and booths lined the streets, each representing different aspects of the community: local businesses, artists, cultural groups, and more. A stage was set up at one end, where musicians tuned their instruments and performers rehearsed. Evelyn and Jasmine set up their table, arranging the baked goods alongside others contributed by neighbors. The atmosphere was filled with laughter, music, and the tantalizing scents of various cuisines. As they settled in, James, Robert, and Michael approached, each carrying items for the event. "Mrs. Harris, Jasmine, good to see you both," James called out. "Hello, gentlemen," Evelyn replied warmly. "This is quite the turnout." "It's fantastic," Robert agreed. "A real testament to what we can achieve together." Michael gestured toward the bustling crowd. "People seem genuinely happy. It's uplifting." Just then, Mr. Thompson, the grocery store manager, joined them. "Good morning, everyone," he greeted. "Mrs. Harris, your cobbler is legendary. I'm glad it's part of today's feast." "Thank you, Mr. Thompson," she replied graciously. "And thank you for supporting the festival." He smiled. "It's my pleasure. Our store is sponsoring the refreshments. It's the least we can do for the community." As the day progressed, the festival thrived. Children played games, artists showcased their work, and diverse musical acts entertained the crowd. Evelyn watched with joy as people from all walks of life interacted, shared stories, and built new connections. Mid-afternoon, an announcement was made from the stage. "Ladies and gentlemen," the MC began, "please welcome Daniel, one of our community members, who would like to share a few words." Evelyn's attention sharpened as she saw Daniel step onto the stage. He appeared nervous but determined, clutching a piece of paper. The crowd grew quiet. "Hello, everyone," Daniel began, his voice steadying as he spoke. "I want to take this opportunity to address something important. Recently, I've come to realize the impact of my actions on those around me." He glanced toward Evelyn, who offered an encouraging nod. "I haven't always treated people with the respect they deserve," he continued. "But through the support and guidance of this community, especially individuals like Mrs. Harris and the veterans here today, I've learned valuable lessons about empathy and understanding." Murmurs of support rippled through the audience. "I want to apologize to anyone I've hurt," Daniel said sincerely. "And I commit to being a positive force in our community moving forward." Applause erupted, filling the air with affirmation. Daniel stepped down from the stage, a look of relief and hope on his face. Evelyn felt a swell of pride and compassion. "That took courage," she remarked. "It did," James agreed. "He's making amends." As Daniel approached, Evelyn extended her hand. "Thank you for sharing your thoughts," she said kindly. He shook her hand warmly. "Thank you for giving me a chance to change." "Growth is always possible," she replied. "I'm glad you're part of our community." The festival continued, the energy elevated by the heartfelt moment. Later, Evelyn found herself seated at a picnic table, surrounded by friends and family. Jasmine played guitar softly, providing a melodic backdrop to their conversations. Mr. Patel, the bookstore owner, joined them. "This is quite the gathering," he observed. "It's heartening to see everyone come together." "It truly is," Evelyn agreed. "Moments like these remind us of the good in people." As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the festivities, a group of local students took the stage. They performed a song they had written about unity and hope, their youthful voices harmonizing beautifully. The lyrics spoke of overcoming differences, embracing diversity, and building a brighter future together. Tears welled in Evelyn's eyes as she listened. She thought of the journey they had all undertaken, the challenges faced, the bridges built, and the healing that had occurred. Turning to James, she said, "You know, this feels like the start of something enduring." He nodded thoughtfully. "I believe it is. We've laid a strong foundation." Robert raised his glass of lemonade, to continued progress and the strength of our community. "Cheers," everyone echoed, clinking their cups together. As darkness fell, lanterns were lit, illuminating the square with a soft, welcoming glow. Families lingered, reluctant to let the evening end. Laughter and cheerful conversations filled the air, underscoring the sense of camaraderie that had blossomed. Evelyn stood and gazed around, her heart full. She noticed Daniel volunteering at one of the booths, assisting children with an art project. His demeanor was gentle, his interactions genuine. It was a testament to the power of compassion and the possibility of transformation. Jasmine joined her, slipping an arm around her waist. "It's been a perfect day," she said softly. "It has indeed," Evelyn replied. "I'm grateful to witness it." "You're a big part of why it happened, Grandma." She shook her head modestly. It was a collective effort. Everyone played a role. As the festival drew to a close, the MC returned to the stage for final remarks. "Thank you all for making this day unforgettable. Let's carry the spirit of unity beyond today and continue to support one another." The crowd responded with enthusiastic applause. Walking home under the star-studded sky, Evelyn felt a deep sense of peace. The cool night air was refreshing, and the scent of blooming jasmine filled her senses, a reminder of life's simple pleasures. Reaching her front porch, she paused to admire the moonlight casting delicate shadows across her garden. Jasmine hugged her goodnight before heading to her own home nearby. Inside, Evelyn settled into her favorite armchair, a quilt draped over her lap. She reflected on the journey that had led to this moment, the initial act of disrespect, the support of the veterans, the community meetings, and the personal growth she had witnessed in Daniel and others. She realized that adversity had been the catalyst for meaningful change. By choosing to respond with grace and determination rather than resentment, they had transformed challenges into opportunities for connection and understanding. Evelyn reached for her journal, a habit she had maintained over the years. Opening to a fresh page, she began to write, "Today, I witnessed the beauty of a community united. In the faces of neighbors and the laughter of children, I saw hope and resilience. We have come together not just to celebrate, but to affirm our commitment to one another. It's a reminder that kindness begets kindness, and when we stand together, there's no limit to what we can achieve." She paused, tapping the pen thoughtfully before adding, "May we continue to nurture these bonds, to listen with open hearts, and to act with compassion. The journey is ongoing, but today has shown me that we are on the right path." Closing the journal, she felt content. The challenges of the past were not forgotten, but they had been woven into a larger tapestry of growth and unity. Evelyn prepared for bed, the day's joyful memories accompanying her. As she drifted to sleep, she carried with her the sounds of the festival, the music, the laughter, the voices raised in harmony. In the days and months that followed, the spirit of the Unity Festival endured. The community continued to thrive, bolstered by ongoing initiatives and a shared commitment to mutual respect. Evelyn remained an active presence, her wisdom and kindness influencing those around her. The veterans expanded their outreach programs, and Jasmine took on a leadership role in organizing events. Daniel became a dedicated volunteer, his transformation inspiring others to reflect on their own actions. He and Evelyn developed a genuine friendship, often collaborating on community projects. One afternoon, while tending to her garden, Evelyn received a letter from the town council. It was an invitation to be honored at an upcoming ceremony for her contributions to the community. When the day arrived, she stood before a gathering of friends, family, and neighbors. The mayor presented her with a plaque, acknowledging her unwavering dedication and the positive impact she had made. "Mrs. Harris," he said, "your compassion and leadership have been a guiding light for us all. Thank you for showing us the power of unity." She accepted the honor with humility. "I'm deeply moved," she replied, "but this recognition belongs to everyone here. Together, we've created something beautiful." The audience rose in a standing ovation, their applause echoing the collective appreciation. That evening, Evelyn hosted a small gathering at her home. Surrounded by loved ones, she felt a profound sense of fulfillment. As the sun set, painting the sky with vibrant hues, Jasmine raised a toast. "To Grandma, whose heart and spirit inspire us every day." "To Evelyn," everyone echoed, lifting their glasses. She looked around the circle of faces, each one a testament to the bonds they had forged. "Thank you," she said softly. "You've all enriched my life beyond measure." The night unfolded with stories, laughter, and the warmth of shared connection. The garden, illuminated by twinkling lights, became a haven of joy and reflection. In the quiet moments that followed, Evelyn sat gazing at the stars. James joined her, his demeanor contemplative. "Thinking about the journey?" he asked. She nodded. "It's remarkable how far we've come." "Indeed," he agreed. "And there's still so much potential ahead." She smiled. "As long as we continue to walk this path together." "Count on it," he affirmed. The gentle breeze carried the fragrant scent of roses and jasmine, a soothing backdrop to their thoughts. Evelyn knew that life would continue to present challenges, but she felt equipped to face them. With grace, resilience, and the unwavering support of her community. Her story, once marked by an act of disrespect, had evolved into a tapestry of unity and hope. It was a testament to the power of standing up, not just against injustice, but for the values that bind us together. As the evening drew to a close, Evelyn felt a deep sense of peace. The love and harmony that enveloped her were the true rewards of a life lived with purpose and compassion. She whispered a silent prayer of gratitude, her heart full. And in that moment, beneath the vast expanse of the starlit sky, Evelyn Harris knew that she was exactly where she was meant to be, at the heart of a community united. Thanks for joining us. If you enjoyed this story, don't miss the next one. Click on the video now to watch. We appreciate your support, and we'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments.